We all talk about these things. I did it. I did it.
Biden under attack. The vice president is the target, and Senator Kamala Harris scores some hits as the Democrats debate in Miami.
To highlight the left-leaning lurch of the Democrat Party towards socialism.
Labeling the left, the GOP brings fear of socialism to the debates. How much will that resonate?
It became clear to me and our command staff that this was neglect of duty.
2 more deputies are fired. New fallout from the Stoneman Douglas massacre. We will take that to the roundtable.
Good Sunday morning. 2 nights, 20 candidates, South Florida in the spotlight, and a heated start to the race to take on President Trump.
They came, they saw, they debated. Everyone tried for a breakout moment, and a few succeeded, notably Julian Castro and Kamala Harris, while others held on to their high positions in the polls. Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, Pete Buttigieg, while the frontrunner Joe Biden had a tough night, seemingly unprepared for a withering attack on his civil rights record by Senator Kamala Harris. Biden suddenly looked vulnerable and not inevitable.
The debate defined the divisions among the Democrats, the party's left, progressive flank, and the moderate middle. Republicans came to town too, labeling the Democrats' policies as socialism. We will talk all about that, a debate debrief of sorts right here with our guests. Juan Peñalosa is the executive director of the Florida Democratic Party. Armando Ibarra is president of the Miami Young Republicans. And we welcome you both for a debate debrief through a South Florida lens, if you will.
Yeah, we are so glad that you are here. Armando, let me begin with you as a faithful young Republican leader. Was there anything that you saw Wednesday or Thursday night at these debates that you said, hey, that's pretty good?
Well, I thought that Kamala Harris's attack on Biden, really, she's shown in that attack. I think he looks very vulnerable. He looks fragile. He looks maybe like he's lost a step from the last time we saw him as vice president. I agree. He no longer looks inevitable. I think that his time is done. It's only a matter of time before he falls from the polls.
You think he already was demolished, as it were, by one night?
Well, I think it's a signal. It's a canary in the coal mine of what we're going to see in months in the future, where he just seems to not be able to keep up with the energy of the party, both energetically, but also ideologically. The party's moving far to the left.
As we talk about that, Juan, before we get to you, let's actually listen to that exchange that really defined night 2, in a way, of the debates. The debate, the moment between Joe Biden and Kamala Harris when they were talking about the defining social justice platform that Joe Biden really is very proud of, and Kamala Harris really kind of called him on it in a very prosecutorial way. Take a listen.
There was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools, and she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me.
The fact is that in terms of busing, you would have been able to go to school the same exact way because it was a local decision made by your city council. That's fine. That's one of the things I argued for, that we should be breaking down these lines.
Vice President Biden, do you agree today that you were wrong to oppose busing in America then?
No,
do you agree?
I did not oppose busing in America. What I opposed is busing ordered by the Department of Education.
Kamala Harris in full-on prosecutor mode. Juan, Armando sort of gave his definition of that moment. What's yours?
Sure. I think what you saw on the debate stage is what's happening in kitchen tables all around this country. Issues of race, issues of economic disparity, issues of climate change, all of those are on full display on the Democratic debate stage. And I think you saw that portray over the course of the 2 nights.
Yeah, but Juan, I just think, and I'm speaking here as objectively as I can, that Vice President Biden should have been prepared for this kind of an attack or criticism, and he just didn't seem nimble. He didn't respond as quickly, and frankly, this thing about, oh, well, your city council approved busing is the old states' rights argument that all the segregationists made when busing was court-ordered busing was very much in the news back in the 60s.
Sure. I'm the executive director of the Florida Democratic Party. I'm not a political pundit, but I will say this. I do think that those issues that came out on the debate stage, issues of historic racism and institutional racism, economic disparity, those are issues that we as a party need to address. Those are issues that I don't think we have addressed appropriately in the past, but I think that largely they're a result of those conversations, and I want to thank Donald Trump for bringing those conversations to light, because I think that the policies that he's instituted have brought those back to the top and brought economic disparity, institutional racism. Those issues are back at conversations we're all having today.
You know, one of the really interesting parts of that moment is that Joe Biden showed no contrition at all for any of his decisions, and Kamala Harris flat out asked him, would you do this again today? In such a contrast to Mayor Pete Buttigieg, who is dealing in South Bend, Indiana, his own city, with a police shooting of a black man who died, who did show contrition. Weigh in on that, if you would, Armando. This in the sort of this moment of race conversation in our country, did you see a difference there?
Well, I think in the long run, the attack is not really going to help Kamala Harris either. Because a lot of Americans saw her as accusing implicitly Vice President Biden of being a racist. And I think that many...
Excuse me, she explicitly said, I don't believe you are a racist, but you supported and you had dealings with two segregationist senators, Eastland and Herman Talmadge, when you were a young senator. So she didn't accuse him of racism, but she said he supported basically a racist or discriminatory policy.
Well, I think, most people see that, having been vice president for President Obama, most people are not going to buy into the fact that, that Biden did not act in good faith and goodwill throughout his career. I think that obviously civil rights is a very difficult issue, and he's been in politics long enough to have had to operate in a different environment that we live in today. So I don't think that her attacks, I think a lot of people see them as perhaps implicitly accusing him of racism. That's not, I think that's going to alienate them. I'm not saying that maybe that's her intention, but I think that's how a lot of the audience is going to see that. And I think that most people are going to see that, they're almost going to feel bad for Biden. He looks out of step. He looks like he's lost a step. And so, being implicitly accused of racism is not going to, I don't think is going to attract very many people.
Well, Juan, on that score, let me ask you, I thought the only moment that Eric Swalwell had that was a good moment was when he told the story about being a young kid, and this presidential candidate 32 years ago had come to the California State Democratic Convention and said it's time to pass the torch. And that candidate, of course, was Joe Biden.
I want to go back to something that Glenna mentioned and Armando just mentioned, which is contrition. And I think that I disagree. I do think that Joe Biden showed some contrition. I think that's in stark contrast to what we see out of the Republican Party, both in Florida and at the top of the ticket with Donald Trump. There has been no contrition when you say that there are good people on both sides. And I'm not saying that anybody is racist. What I'm saying is, when we choose words that hurt and that bring these issues back up, we have to reflect on who we are as a country. I think Democrats are doing that. I think you saw it on the debate stage. I think that Republicans have not done that traditionally, and I think that's a stark contrast between the two of us.
All right, well, let me ask you to get back to the question that I wanted you to respond to, which is age. I mean, Joe Biden is 76, Bernie Sanders is 77,
and Donald Trump is in his 70s as well.
72
yes,
or just turned 73.
70 is the new 50, isn't it?
Agreed. Look, I think that a good idea is a good idea no matter who holds it. I think that people are capable of doing the job at hand no matter what age they are, and I think that most of America believes that. So I think to say pass the torch, certainly we have to involve new ideas. Eric has great new ideas, as do Kirsten Gillibrand and other younger members on the stage. That doesn't discount the fact and the work that people like Joe Biden and other seniors have put into this party.
So to play off your words matter, let's talk about the word socialism, because we saw that in full-on display here. Ron McDaniel, the head of the RNC, brought it down. But socialism in South Florida has been used since the governor's race in the DeSantis versus Gillum race in 2018. I covered a lot of Ron DeSantis' campaign, and I watched him use that in communities in South Florida who know firsthand what it's like to live under a socialist dictatorship, such as Cubans and Venezuelans. Armando, though, How can you legitimately paint the Democratic Party or any of its ideas as socialism? The ones where not Bernie Sanders, who actually calls himself that, but there's 19 other people, and off the stage another 3 or 4 who don't. Are democratic ideas really socialism?
Well, I think there are many elements of them such as their efforts to nationalize the healthcare system, have government run healthcare for everybody, their ideas to abolish the Electoral College, their ideas to pack the Supreme Court. These are all echoes of the politics of Kirchner, of Lula, of Chavez, and so when
Hacking the Supreme Court?
That's
You
essential.
think that's a Democratic issue?
I mean-
what about when Obama had a Supreme Court nominee that the Republicans refused to
The
accept?
Republicans
That's not
didn't
hacking the
change
Supreme
any of the
Court.
rules. The Democratic
They did
Party
change the
today-
rules.
They did not. The Democratic Party today is advocating for changing the Constitution to advance a political
Look,
domination.
I lived in Venezuela. Packing the Supreme Court is something Maduro did. That is something we've seen Governor DeSantis do here in the state.
Not at
It
all.
is absolutely,
That's inaccurate.
absolutely.
That's inaccurate.
We've saw the Republicans in the Senate refuse to allow a president of the United States put his Supreme Court candidate forward and holding out for a Republican candidate. So packing the Supreme Court, if that's the issue you're weighing in on as Democratic Socialists, that's something the Republican Party is
All right,
not.
let me hold on just a minute, gentlemen. Excuse me. I want to alert our esteemed director. Cue up that John Hickenlooper bite, because during the debate, the Colorado governor and former Denver mayor really made a strong point on the very subject that Glenna brought up: socialism and Democrats. Here's Governor Hickenlooper.
The bottom line is, if we don't clearly define that we are not socialists, the Republicans are going to come at us every way they can and call us socialists.
Well, I think Hickenlooper is right, isn't he?
He is. He absolutely is right. And I personally think that socialism is a scheme that Donald Trump and his campaign have drummed up. I think it's insulting to me as a member of the Latino community. We know what socialism is. We do not live in socialism in the United States.
Well, wouldn't Medicare for all, and not as a pejorative, but wouldn't Medicare for all be something that you could call a socialist policy?
I think what we're looking at is expanding healthcare, affordable healthcare, to every man, woman, and child in this country. If you look at what Maduro and Castro have done, it is very different. You can't liken the two. And for us to take the bait and allow Donald Trump to say affordable health care, a plan that provides affordable health care to every man and woman child in this country, is the same as Maduro or Castro, is insulting to me as a Latino. It should be insulting to all of us as Americans.
I mean, Republicans also have the goal of having affordable, broad-based health care for everybody, but it's how you do it. And the Democratic Party has chosen to advance socialist solutions to these challenges. We see that in healthcare. We see it with their proposals to make colleges free, which essentially would make the working class pay for the public, education of the few that have that privilege to go to college. We see that with the way that they want to manipulate our political system in order to advance the Democratic Party's power, like they did, like Chavez did. And so it's not just that we're calling them it, is that the Democratic Party has chosen policies and politics to match the name that
Armando, that's not true.
Armando, let me get you both to weigh in on this. Julian Castro, who had a very strong night, I think everybody would agree, he said he is proposing that anybody who crosses the border illegally and is caught, or turns himself or herself into Border Patrol agents, should be charged with a civil offense, not a crime. Do you think that that is too liberal, too wrong? I mean, how do you see that?
I believe that it's effectively the equivalent to having open borders. And all these candidates then came out and were in favor of extending free government-provided health care to all these illegal immigrants as well. That is a very large incentive that's going to drive more illegal immigrants into our country. So the Democrats are proposing policies that are going to exacerbate the humanitarian crisis occurring in Mexico.
So Armando, what would you do with the 50 million undocumented immigrants who are here today? Refuse health care to them? Let them die on the streets? Is that the America that we live in? Is that the America that we live in right now?
Government-paid health care we need private sector-based health care, not government-paid.
They pay their taxes.
What is is there a Republican Party policy on how to keep 11 million people here healthy as they go through whatever process is happening
Well,
right
I think
now?
the first thing we have to do is we have to secure the border. We have to stop the flow, eliminate the flow of illegal immigrants through the border. And then once that's done, I believe that the American people would, in goodwill and good faith, vote in favor, support in favor of policies to legalize these. But that would only happen once we've secured the border, once we've proven that we're not going to repeat the mistakes of amnesties in the past. Once we've done that, I think
it
the
was
American
Ronald
people will
Reagan,
support
I
it.
believe, who granted the largest amnesty
Correct.
to people in this country. And of course, that was when it was supposed to end and borders would be better controlled.
Let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, Venezuela, I think, is an excellent example. I think in Venezuela, you have Republicans and Democrats who agree that Maduro is an evil dictator. The difference is we are allowing the Trump administration to round up Venezuelans and send them back to the very country that
no
he is
TPS
with
either.
no temporary protected status. So
Yeah.
I think you believe, if you believe in a humane solution to this, certainly rounding up people who are fleeing an evil dictator and asking for sanctuary in our country, sending them back is not the right solution.
Well, I mean, in all fairness, the Democratic Party held its debates in Miami, did not once mention Cuba or Venezuela.
Or climate change.
And it was not by it was not by coincidence. We'll recall that until President Trump took office, the Democratic Party's policies were of reapproachment with the Maduro and Cuba and Castro regimes, not of isolating them. That Obama and Biden, having scorned the Venezuelan opposition in 2015,
This
helped
has
to
been a
create this
really
refugee
good
crisis.
spirited discussion. We could go on, but we are going to cut it off right here. But Armando, Juan, great to have you come in.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us. Thanks,
And up
Armando.
next, we're going to take this debate and other hot topics of the week right to the roundtable. Stay with us.
It has been a tumultuous week in the news, obviously, the debates and much more. We want to sort it out, try to make some sense from it, separate the wheat from the chaff, as it were, with our Powerhouse Roundtable.
And as always, we have a great one for you, so let's get right to the introductions. Ed Pozzuoli is president of the Tripp Scott Law Firm in Fort Lauderdale and also an influential voice in the Republican Party. Nancy Ankrum is the editor of the editorial page of the Miami Herald. Jack Seiler is Fort Lauderdale's former mayor, former Democratic state lawmaker, and a veteran trial lawyer. Welcome, everybody. Great to have you.
Good morning. Great to have you come in.
On debate week.
Nancy, you were in the hall.
I was there.
And NBC, God bless them, they did a pretty good job, I thought, but they charged non-NBC affiliates. They wanted to charge a huge amount of money, so I watched it here at Channel 10.
Even though you were worth it. You were worth it.
Anyway, we saw your editorials, but give us your impression, the strongest things that you came out of those debates thinking.
You know, people kept asking me, who won, who lost? And it's so early that winners and losers for me were really hard to call, except perhaps on the second night. Kamala Harris clearly came out roaring in that exchange with Joe Biden. However, I think the question is, who still has traction? Who gained? Who lost traction? Mm-hmm. It's early yet. There are many voices, and some would say, and I would agree, too many voices on the stage, and this really needs to be culled quickly.
Well, you know, Jack, I'm going to you first because you are the Democrat. There were varying levels of expectations. Of course, everyone Joe Biden had the most to lose. Maybe someone like Pete Buttigieg had the most to win. But who was the winner and loser, or plural, if you will?
Let me agree with Nancy. I think it's too early to call winners and losers. I think the reality is that Joe Biden entered that debate having. Just don't make a mistake. Don't lose the debate. Just have to hold your own because he is the most sustainable candidate. He is a candidate that has the most support already. So I disagree that Joe Biden had to go out and do something spectacular in the opening debate. I think Joe Biden just had to simply show that, hey, I'm here. I'm going to be here through all the debates. I'm going to be here at the end. I think when you look at some of the other candidates, I thought the female candidates had a very good night. Both nights. I agree with you on Kamala Harris. I think she came out, showed that she has some presidential qualities. I think Amy Klobuchar showed. I mean, no one's talking about her. Probably the most substantive person on that stage.
Why isn't anybody talking about her?
I just think where she comes from and her part of the country, she's not the most charismatic person. But when you actually look at the issues, she is substantive. She is deep. She's intellectual. So I think when you look at I thought the female candidates had a good night. But like I said, Joe Biden just had to not lose.
As is Elizabeth, he lost, but as is Elizabeth Warren. And Warren did what you're saying Joe Biden should have done. You'll notice, I noticed that Elizabeth Warren started out really strong on Wednesday night, and then she receded, and then she ended strong.
It's early in the apprentice season, and you don't really know who's going to win the apprentice during the first season. So I think the president's going to have some fun about as these folks get fired. You know what I'm saying? So there's clearly some of those people didn't belong on the stage. I mean, but Joe Biden lost. Look, Jack, I agree. He's the front runner still, and it's not going to impact that status today. But what it did, he failed. He lost the debate. It was a moment for Kamala Harris. And he was not prepared. He was stuttering. It was a rough night for Joe Biden. So
you know who disagrees with you, at least in public, is President Trump from Japan, who weighed in the next day, who said, paraphrasing, not verbatim, Kamala Harris is getting too much credit for being so great, and Joe, he wasn't that bad. He was fine. What did the president? What do you think the intentions were there?
Far be it for me to look into this.
Come on. How manipulative can he be? And people are asking, well, who can really take on Trump? And I think it's a bifurcated question. Who can take on Trump on the debate stage, and who can take on Trump at the polls? I think that Kamala Harris would probably wipe the floor up with Trump on the debate stage. Can she go toe-to-toe with him at the polls? I'm not so sure.
I'm not ready to concede the first point either. But here's what you saw, though, is that you did see a party a little bit in disarray because you did see them. It's a real conflict about how far left have they gone. Yeah. So when, in immigration, providing health care benefits to illegal immigrants, to getting rid of 180 million people from private insurance. I mean, my gosh, how far left has this party gone?
But Ed, you got to look. There's 20 people over 2 nights on that stage. There's such a divide across those 20 people in terms of gender, in terms of age, in terms of it's a generational gap up there on that stage. You saw with Mayor Pete standing next to with Joe Biden. So I think you have to recognize it's that debate was pushing them to progressive issues, pushing them to extreme issues, and I would say that NBC took them a little bit there with the questions, more extreme progressive. I think at the end of the day, the Democrat that's going to prevail is the one that can show he's a working class Democrat, he or she is a working class Democrat, he or she can talk about those issues that we're going to talk about around the kitchen table, those traditional issues. Right. This debate was not about kitchen table issues.
But they were.
Who's more extreme, who's more liberal, who's more progressive, even so far to say who's more socialist. There's no way a socialist is going to come out of the Democratic Party.
One word I didn't hear is the word freedom and giving individuals greater choices in how to conduct their lives. What I heard was more government control over health care, an imposition of additional taxes on everybody, a control of I'll tell you what, they cornered the vote on illegal immigrants. I mean, because they're going to give all kinds of free stuff to everybody.
All right, that's a good point at which to take a break, because I think there'll be a response, Ed. So
what a tease. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, we are in the midst of a rock and roll roundtable here with Ed Pizzoli, Nancy Ankrum, and Jack Seiler. Jack, let me go back to the point that Ed made just before we broke, which is he said they didn't really talk about freedom, and it's true, that word, I didn't hear it over the course of 2 nights, but specifically, there was no mention of Venezuela or the crisis there and in surrounding countries, no mention of Cuba, Nicaragua, or even Israel. So now some of that is the result of the questions that were posed, but any of those candidates could have brought those things up.
Well, I think the one thing that you have in common with those 3 issues is that they're all foreign relations. That's all foreign relations matters that weren't really addressed in this debate at all.
Yeah, well, they
Not
mentioned
just those,
Iran briefly.
Briefly.
Yeah.
And so I think you will have a debate that's more substantive on foreign matters. I mean, certainly what's going on in Venezuela is a crime. What's going on in Cuba, we're seeing them backtracking as a country. And so, yes, we do need to start talking about solutions to Venezuela and Cuba and Israel. But the bottom line is I don't think the debate moderators and the debate speakers took it there. So I don't think you can criticize the candidates, because someone would then say, well, why are they moving off the topics they're being asked about to talk about?
But on the other hand, I've got to say, I thought Kamala Harris was pretty brilliant when she said, I want to talk about the subject of race. It was she who raised it. Any of those candidates could raise almost anything they wanted
and she
to.
raised it well, and Joe Biden wasn't prepared for that. I mean, for however that worked out. But going back to Venezuela, I was surprised it wasn't raised, and maybe it wasn't raised because Bernie didn't Bernie Sanders vacation there? I don't know.
Nicaragua.
Oh, it was Nicaragua. I'm sorry. I don't know.
And you know what the thing is? Also, I'm surprised that they did not bring it up themselves, despite no matter what the moderators asked, because none of the candidates really answered the questions. They moved on to whatever point
and
they
nobody
wanted to make.
kept to time cues except Joe Biden.
Right, except Joe
I do want
Biden,
to give Marianne Williams some credit. I know that she is the butt of some jokes, but she actually brought up race first. She brought it up before Kamala.
That's true.
And actually in a very meaningful way.
In the
and
seance
then
kind of
Kamala and Kamala, jumped on that since it came
that's true.
since it came up.
Well, I'm hoping the next debate does get into foreign policy more.
Well, foreign policy is South Florida's local story, and
exactly.
I'm not sure anybody really understood that. But let's play a little bit of tape that really clarified how candidates need to know how foreign policy and Cuba is part of the South Florida psyche. Let's listen to Bill de Blasio here.
Hasta la victoria siempre!
Watch the women in the back. Watch them look at each other. Watch them talk. Hasta la victoria siempre is on always to victorious. And this is Bill de...
On to victory.
On to victory always. And Bill de Blasio was at the airport with union workers, riling them up, having really clearly no idea that Che Guevara, who is considered the murderous partner of Fidel Castro in the revolution, that was his slogan. And the women behind him knew. Ed, how do you not know that when you come to South Florida? Prepare yourself for the local issues.
Maybe he knew it. And maybe he views Che Guevara as a hero like many on the left do.
Okay.
Let me
spoken
say
like
this.
a real
Yeah,
Jack.
let me say
You want to handle that one?
I attribute that to being tone deaf. That right there is.
I've seen it. I've seen union. Look, I've seen people with pictures of Che on their shirt. I mean, and walking around.
but
saying
the
these
mayor-
phrases.
I think you're
Let's
going-
be real about
of New
this.
I
York
think you're
in
going
Miami?
too. I think you're going too far.
The mayor of New
I
York
think
is an idiot, but that's a different issue.
Again, I think you're going too far. But the reality is that's a tone deaf approach to the issue. But you're also looking at a gentleman that would not get reelected right now in New York.
Right.
Who probably I don't think should be in this national debate anyway, shouldn't be on the national stage. So you have an extreme candidate that is getting the airtime coming out of this debate for clearly wrong comments. I mean, clearly irresponsible comments. But at the end of the day, let's get back to the candidates that maybe
Jack,
the 8 or 10 that ought to be having that, and they're not going to make that mistake.
Jack,
Not now.
with all due respect to you, because I do respect you, that is where your party is. And that's just the reality of it. You are a coastal party. You have elites in New York, Senator New York, and you have elites Senator in California, and that is where your party is. And so the idea around that he's in a fringe candidate, I don't think he's all that fringe. His ideas are not fringe on that debate stage.
Well, and they're not very popular in New York City. So, I don't think de Blasio is emblematic, symbolic of, I'm not a member, I'm NPA, but I certainly wouldn't want him to represent the Democratic Party. Anyway,
He will not be the flag bearer for the Democratic Party.
He's not going to be the flag bearer for New York. All right, everybody hold on. We'll be back after a break.
pick up the roundtable about the debates with something that wasn't really talked about, talking about local issues. There are 20 people in Miami hardly talking about climate change for a party that makes climate change really one of its banner issues. Nancy, Wednesday night, I believe it was 7 minutes on climate change. Thursday night, even less.
And this is 7 minutes divided among all these
20
candidates.
people.
Yeah.
Well, 10 people at a time.
Right. I was really disappointed. We are ground zero in South Florida and specifically in Miami. And any one of those candidates could have really taken the question and pitched it to us. Because where Miami goes, so goes, up the coasts.
Right.
And I was really disappointed.
Well, Governor Inslee of Washington State has made this his issue, but he was given a high soft one by Rachel Maddow. What would you do to save Miami from sea level rise, climate change? And he kind of whiffed.
Yes.
He didn't really answer the question.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You're right, Michael. And the problem is climate change is going to be a major issue in this upcoming election. It's already become a major issue in Florida. I think it's going to become a major issue throughout this country.
Right.
Ed talks about the coast politically. Well, let me tell you something. Climate change is impacting not just the coast, but this whole country. And I think for the debate not to focus a little bit on that was a miss by the media.
Well, they could. The debate is all about talking. There's a lot of, you said wheat and chaff. I think it was more chaff than wheat, right? But here's the issue. They could talk all they want about climate change and plans around climate change. Then we have a Governor DeSantis who's on the money on climate change and has spent the basically first 6 months of his tenure really addressing those issues as hard as anybody in the country.
Well, there's no question that the governor has really been sort of on point, I think, for the most part, with funding and Everglades restoration. But I want to move on here to immigration and the debate, because that really was the substance, I think, of much of both nights. And Julian Castro, former mayor of San Antonio, former HUD secretary, was really strong. And here is part of his exchange with Beto O'Rourke.
The reason that they're separating these little children from their families is that they're using Section 1325 of that act, which criminalizes coming across the border, to incarcerate the parents and then separate them. Some of us on this stage have called to end that section, to terminate it. Some, like Congressman O'Rourke, have not.
Nancy, you were there for that exchange. I have to say, Beto O'Rourke kind of looked like the kid on the final test day who is asked a question and sort of just stumbles through and gives you a rote and not very good answer.
And that's just who he is. He may have gotten them all riled up in Texas, and that is where he needs to return. He really had no business on the stage. We could really see he was not familiar, not plugged in, not well trained in the issues of this nation or globally. And when he got stuck, he turned to, and so did some of the other candidates, what I call spandering, which is he broke into not really great Spanish.
That was pandering.
Yeah.
That was just flat out pandering.
I made a comment earlier. He should have saved that for the post-debate interviews with the Hispanic media and the Spanish language media. And that would have been in response.
In context, though, one of the Spanish language stations, along with an English language network, Spanish language network, was one of the sponsors. So I think in context, and plus, as someone who learned a second language as an adult, you don't make fun of people who don't speak so.
Sí, tengo un acento muy feo, señor.
I just would not go there on a national stage unless I had a perfect use of that language and a perfect understanding
You
of
don't
what
want
I'm
to sound
saying.
like an
So from a
idiot.
performance standpoint, Castro did well, though, I thought. He really did expose Beto O'Rourke for
Is this Fidel or
the
Julian?
Julian.
Okay.
No, Julian. And he showed real knowledge on the issue. Now, whether people agree with him or not, but he did show Beto O'Rourke to be an
But
absolute.
but when he said, I've just got a feeling that President Trump and the Republican Party, when they heard him say, let's decriminalize crossing the border, and it's sort of like, let's give somebody a ticket instead of arresting them. I think that's a vulnerable area.
Let's put a sign up saying we're open. I mean, that's really what's happening. You're going to have more, and you're going to just encourage more and more crisis right at the border.
So should the candidates have done a better job between talking about the legality of crossing the border and the humanitarian aspects of those who cross the border.
You're 100% right. Absolutely, the discussion needs to be about those that are there now. We have to deal with in a humanitarian way, but we cannot ignore laws. Immigration laws exist for a reason. If you don't like the immigration law, fix it in Washington, D.C., fix it after you get elected. But this combination of all of a sudden, because we're going to be humanitarian, we're going to ignore laws or decriminalize everything, that's a mistake. And I'm hoping the party doesn't go there, because I think when you look at what's going to happen in this national election, I think it's going to be who goes to the middle and who can work, as I said earlier, with the working class, with the middle class, is who's going to win this debate. And the middle class and the working class are not in agreement that we decriminalize immigration laws.
They missed your voice at both debates, Jack.
All right.
Well, we're hearing his voice right here. All right, stay tuned. One more segment of Roundtable after a break. We are having a really lively discussion about the presidential debates, and we have not really talked at any length about Elizabeth Warren, who pretty much dominated the debate. I thought the first night she came out better than she went in. She is in Florida. She is third in the polls, but going up. Jack, what did you think at that moment when I think it was Lester Holt said, any of you candidates who favor Medicare for all, getting rid of private health insurance, making everybody take part in a single payer program, and she raised her hand and said, I'm with Bernie. That seems to me like a really big moment.
Well, I think it's a risky moment, and I'm not sure that anybody wants to say I'm with Bernie on all of the issues he's come up. Bernie has shown himself now in 2 presidential elections to be one of the more liberal candidates, right? And so,
most liberal.
I'm being careful. I'm saying
socialist.
One of the more liberal candidates. So I'm not sure I would ever get quoted in a debate where I'm still trying to establish my lane. Where is Elizabeth Warren? What lane is she in? Saying I'm with Bernie on an issue that has been somewhat linked with socialism. So I think that was a mistake by her. But I do agree on the first night. I think she came out strong. I think she also did not have the same opponents on stage that they had the second night, so she had the
Yeah,
ability
she had
to
an
dominate a
easier
little
group,
bit.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, she did.
But no, I would never publicly say I'm with Bernie on an issue that is so up in the air.
You know
right
what's so interesting about this transformation? Bernie Sanders used to be the outlier, the sort of socialist Democrat icon for those who are there. Now he's almost becoming mainstream up on that stage. Everyone agreed
and there's
with
the
him.
point about the party moving all the way to the left. And look, Elizabeth Warren raised her hand. I agree with you. Very risky, politically speaking, because you're talking about 180 million Americans who get their insurance through private health care, and they're talking, at least they're honest. It wasn't like Obama, if you want your plan, you can keep your plan. No, we don't want your plan. You're going to all go on government plans, and we're going to force you to do that. That's what that was.
At the end of the program, may I say, forgive me, self-grandizing, I'm going to have a commentary about that. Nancy, I need to ask you about Mayor Pete Buttigieg. I thought that the answer to a very direct question about the racial tensions in his hometown of South Bend, when he said, I didn't fix it. I mean, he really owned up to a failure of administration, failure of policy. I thought that was a good moment.
He's working on getting it. Yes, he owned it. I don't think he had any choice. At least he didn't sputter, at least he didn't stutter. I do think that he remains tone deaf to the real deep and abiding problems in black communities, including his own. And just like de Blasio, I think that, New York not really going for de Blasio, if he has alienated to this extent his own black community, then votes he's going to need, he's going to have to work really, really hard.
Although
for
what
them.
he did say, and fairly appropriately, is he made it very clear that what's happening in South Bend is a national issue that we must address.
That was his pivot.
I went to
That was his
college in
pivot.
South Bend. Two of my children have gone to college in South Bend. One still is there. South Bend is not a huge metropolitan area.
Right,
So
right.
I think, one, I appreciated the fact that he owned it. I think for a mayor to step up and say, hey, I didn't handle something the right way or handle it fully, properly the way I would have liked to have handled it, that was a big step for him. And I think that was a win. I think the fact is, though, that what South Bend is dealing with on a very small level, I mean, microcosm, is something happening across the country. And I think that is something that has been recognized, it needs to be addressed, and we need to start talking about solutions nationally, not just in northern
But if
Indiana.
he muffed it in South Bend, then what's he going to do nationally?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
he
that
just
is the
needs
question.
clarity. He
South
needs
Bend is
schooling.
All right,
South
we
Bend is
are-
off Broadway. You know,
we
this
are-
is, you know what I'm saying?
All right, on that note, we are going
Tweet
to say
that.
thank you, a great roundtable. Thank you all very much.
As always.
Stay with us when we come back, the weather, and then a commentary from moi.
looked outside, look right there at the screen. This is our tower cams across South Florida.
Looks a little stormy out there, maybe later, but let's find out from Weather Authority meteorologist Brandon Orr with the Sunday forecast. Brandon.
Yeah, Michael, you see that rain falling there in the background. We have some storms popping up on radar. We've had it on and off pretty much all morning long, and we still have some rain ongoing. It's hit and miss, randomly moving out and about, but we still have some rain over Hialeah, right over the turnpike. Stronger cell, not a lot of lightning with this, just an occasional strike over Chrome Avenue. This is back towards the hammocks. Downtown Miami, you're dry, but it may not stay that way all afternoon long. We have some storms on the coast of Broward County, Deerfield Beach, all the way down to Fort Lauderdale, but at least in Hollywood, you're dry for now. A lot of people still enjoying the beach, but you can see those dark clouds off into the distance. 85 in Miami, may top 90 degrees for a brief time today, but it does look mostly dry. And the 7-day forecast, by the way, has July 4th on it, looking mostly dry. Not too bad.
Brendan, thanks. All right, before we leave you today, a personal perspective about the Democratic debates. As Mel Brooks once said, it's good to be the king and it's good to be the center of the political universe, which we were for 2 nights this week. I watched every minute. I learned a few things. One thing I learned is that Senator Elizabeth Warren is not likely to beat Donald Trump in Florida and maybe the country if she is the nominee and if the foundation of her campaign is Medicare for all. Wednesday night, for the first time, she unequivocally, emphatically said she is in favor of Medicare for all, a single-payer system that would force millions of Americans to give up the health insurance they get on the job.
I'm with Bernie on Medicare for all, and let me tell you why. I spent a big chunk of my life studying why families go broke. And one of the #1 reasons is the cost of health care, medical bills. And that's not just for people who don't have insurance, it's for people who have insurance.
Well, she is right up to a point about health insurance. 180 million Americans get their health insurance at work, and they have problems. It is increasingly expensive. Deductibles keep going up, and the insurance companies are like the Tin Man. They don't have a heart. Still, most people do not want to give up the insurance, and they certainly don't want to see their taxes go up for a Medicare for all plan. And Bernie Sanders says openly taxes would go up. He also claims their health care would be better, cheaper. Well, we don't know that it would do that. When NBC's Lester Holt asked the candidates Thursday night to raise their hands if they want to abolish private health insurance and go to a government-run single-payer system, 2 candidates raised their hands, Bernie Sanders, naturally, and Kamala Harris. She said, I'm with Bernie. Well, that's Elizabeth Warren. We're talking about Kamala Harris. But as soon as the debate was over, Harris reversed herself and said she had misunderstood the question. Really? The most important question of the night? She didn't understand it? Please. Now, Senator Harris says she is in favor of supplemental insurance coverage as well as Medicare for all. Let's check in to see where she stands next week. Democrats won big in the midterm elections last year because they made health care their big issue, a winning issue. Keep and improve Obamacare, they said, protect people with pre-existing conditions. That was the Democrats' theme song 2 years ago. Now, the progressive wing of the party wants to force people off the health insurance they get at work and require them to enroll in a government-run program. That is not a winning strategy, I think, at least not in Florida. Donald Trump and the Republicans already are calling Democrats socialists. They are not. But mandating a single-payer plan for everyone is a step in that direction. A public option plan in addition to private insurance, sure, of course. But let Americans who want to keep the insurance they have at work, keep it. That is my perspective. Hope you have a wonderful Sunday. Remember, as always, stay informed, get involved.
And get online. You can catch any of our shows on local10.com, and you can also subscribe to our This Week in South Florida Roundtable podcast. Take it with you anywhere you go.
And stay tuned for SoFlo Health. That is next here on Local 10. Have a great Sunday.